Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the...
I want to suck your blood. I want to suck your blood. Yeah, I think I sound more like Count from Sesame Street than anything else. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Tony here from Inside Your Screen with a review of Dracula, a BBC/Netflix produced 3-part miniseries written by Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat. Now, what I've just said there will instantly put you into one of two camps. The first camp being the Gatiss-Moffat Appreciation Society fan club, lavishly showering rose petals at their feet, or you could be in the second camp, the I Hate Moffat and Gatiss Hate Club, waving placards of disdain over the fact that Bram Stoker's Dracula has been changed too far off the course of the original text. So then, vampires. What is it about the vampire that audiences find so alluring? Is it the power they exude over mere mortals? I mean, I'm not just talking about bulging muscles of Macho Man Randy Savage like power here.
You made a lot of promises to the Macho Man!
But they move quicker than the human eye, have keener senses than us, and generally have the dexterity of a trained circus acrobat. Is it the sexual nature that the vampire oozes in bucket loads, standing stiff and aloof with esoteric intent? Or could it be that the vampire is the archetype of the original bad boy, the loner that we desperately want to understand but can never get close to?
I love the Power Glove. It's so bad.
However, in popular culture, the vampire is unfortunately the only monster that's grown less brutal and frightening as time has passed. They're tormented souls now, moaning about the fact that they can read people's minds all the time, or sparkle like a disco ball when the lights hit them. They come across nowadays as either hedonistic erotic fanfiction caricatures, or sexless pansies. Moffat and Gatiss's Dracula attempts to bring back the golden age of hammer horror with their interpretation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, with varying degrees of success and failure. Firstly, I started enjoying the style of what they were doing here. It's from the guys that brought you Sherlock, so you know it's going to be stylistic, and the cinematography, especially in the first episode, simmers with 18th century Gothic undertones. Fun factoid. In the first episode we see Dracula's castle. This is the Raya Castle, based in Slovakia, and is the same castle as the one that appeared in the 1922 silent horror classic Nosferatu. So there's some useless info for you if you want to bore someone when you're next out with the lads. There's a feeling, however, that purists, those that love Dracula lore and mythos, might be polarised with some of the choices made here with central characters, and even with some of the themes, because it's a different spin on the overall original concept. As an adaptation of Stoker's text, this will be the decision that will either piss people off, or you'll love it. For me, there were slight, I'd call them political decisions that were popped into the final product that made me wince a little, but we'll get to that in a bit. Set in 1897, we meet Jonathan Harker as a husk of his former self. He's withered, gaunt, basically looking like Max Schreck's Count Orlok in Nosferatu. He's recounting his tragic tale to two nuns of his visit to Transylvania Castle and his ill-fated meeting with Count Dracula. The first episode introduces us to two important characters, notably Dracula himself, played by Glass Bang, and a straight-talking, no-nonsense nun played by Dolly Wells. Now, before I go any further, I just have to say that the casting for Dracula and the Nun was genius. Bang embodies the Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee type of Dracula, menacing and broody, whilst also being able to ham it up when the time calls for it. There's certain lines that seem a little out of place with the period that we're set in, and at points the Dracula on screen is practically turning to the camera and winking. But as I said before, this is a Moffat and Gatiss script, so you're either going to go nuts for it or despise it. Personally, I think Bang makes a fantastic classic-style Dracula, and I hope that we get to see more of this Danish actor in the year ahead. Similarly, Wells' nun character is played fantastically by the actress. Now, there's been some controversy about the reveal at end of episode 1 that the nun is actually Agatha Van Helsing, but in all honesty I didn't mind this gender swap character reveal. Sure, it was played to be a bit of a twist and smacked of Moffat's tried and tested gotcha sort of moment.
Surprise, motherfucker!
But in all honesty, this character was badass. I think she even stole the show away from Dracula in many respects, so kudos to Wells for being able to do that. Now, I could spend 20 odd minutes talking about the whole woke nature of this particular version of Dracula, as many of the men in the series come off as either simple plot devices to get character A to location B, or turn out to be incompetent or flawed in many ways, but it's hardly a surprise given that every big Hollywood franchise has succumbed to the PC agenda at the moment, so we'll leave that to another video. There's a face-off between Van Helsing and Dracula at the end of episode 1 that kind of sets the tone for both characters. Dracula can't be allowed into the monastery unless he's invited in, but knows that by human nature someone inside the building will break. You know, he's Dracula and has unmitigated powers that he may be able to bestow onto a mere mortal. Van Helsing, on the other hand, showcases Dracula's addictive and shameful nature by throwing some blood on the ground and having him act as a dog lapping up whatever morsel he can get. It's a great scene and a great transition into episode 2, which is distinctively different than the first, but once you get into it, you realise that the creators are playing around with convention and making a sort of in-between the panels of the original text. Essentially, episode 2 is a literal game of chess between Dracula and Van Helsing. Set on a ship, it kind of plays like a murder mystery, even though we know who the murderer is, and it kind of feels like a standalone episode to create more of a dynamic between the two main leads. Anyone who's seen BBC's Sherlock and Doctor Who knows that Moffat loves to create a strong, powerful character who is obsessed with another strong, powerful character, so it may come across as tried and tested, but I thought it worked well in this episode. The third episode is probably the most divisive, and in my opinion the poorest. Dracula is now in modern day Britain, having spent something like 125 years in the sea from the climax of the last episode. This sudden shift of gear is once again another gotcha moment.
Surprise, motherfucker!
But I think did disservice to the 2 episodes that came before it. What I mean by that is although the creators were trying to do something creative and bold, which I'm completely behind and give my respect to, it sort of turns itself into a kind of parody. Whether that was the intention, I don't know, but that's what I took away from it. I hate that kind of trope that takes a character from medieval times and plops them into modern day life. It smacks of those kind of 80s sci-fi time travel films that rely on the audience laughing along to people being amazed by modern day appliances like a toaster or a fridge.
New Line Cinema. I've never driven before.
The only film that gets a golden pass for this is Bill and Ted's, but that's because it's fucking Bill and Ted.
What number are we thinking of? 69, dudes!
For instance, I don't want to see Dracula on Tinder for his next snack, and I don't want to see Dracula sending texts with vampire emojis at the end of his sentences. You spent the last 2 hours creating this dark, brooding character, and now you're playing him for laughs. That's not Dracula. If you're a fan of the Dracula lore, you're probably going to have switched off by now, and I wouldn't blame you. I mean, I'm a casual fan of the character, and even I was eye-rolling at certain points in the last episode. Some of the ideas that they presented were a little lackluster, spending more time with side characters from the original text like Lucy Westenra and Jack Seward, who was originally John Seward from the novel, but it took the focus away from Dracula and Van Helsing, which is the main driving force at this point, or so I thought. It was just uninteresting and unengaging, and the thing is, I know why they've done it. It's a political statement about the youths of today who are obsessed by beauty and the likes on Instagram. The character of Lucy is a vacuous, vain representation of the millennials nowadays, you know, I get it. We're introduced to her character by snapping a selfie and the love hearts pouring out of her phone because she's so obsessed with magnificence and attractiveness. You know, I get it. But I think there could have been something done a little less on the nose than what was finally created. And this gets me into the political angle that's so evident throughout the whole series of Dracula. Whenever a writer or a producer tries to shoehorn in a political agenda in a TV show or film, it usually comes across as subtle as a boxing glove smashing through a TV set and bopping you on the nose. In this version of Dracula, we're presented with a bisexual Dracula. Now that's fine. I mean, throughout the vampire mythos, we've come to know that these creatures are hedonistic in nature, and you can almost see Dracula in a smorgasbord orgy of men, women, you know, even animals. But in this series, Dracula's gay proclivities are pushed out to the forefront like a fat kid at Pizza Hut wanting a third helping of free ice cream at the end of the meal. And it doesn't serve the story. At the beginning of episode 1, Agatha asked Jonathan Harker whether he had sex with Dracula. Now, on one hand, you could argue that, well, of course he's had sex with Dracula. I mean, his face says it all when she asks him. And if you think about this, the Count has been in the castle for so long without any entertainment, and here comes some young stud fresh off the carriage to arrange his housing affairs. Who wouldn't be horny? Am I right, guys? But it doesn't really propel the story in any way that matters. It just seems to be thrown in for shock value. There's not really any mention of Dracula having sex with women in any of the episodes, but they seem to push this notion that Dracula loves the guys quite a lot. I suppose to subvert expectations of the classic Dracula we've grown up on. I mean, I'm all up for having different ethnic, religious and cultural diversity in films and TV, having shows that break the mould with taboo subjects, but it seems like in this particular instance the BBC wanted to showcase so many diverse groups that it ended up hurting itself by doing so. There's a scene in episode 3 where Lucy is driving in a limo with all her friends and it just positively reeks of someone going, okay, we need an Asian girl, a gay guy, a black girl, so we can appease everyone watching this. There's a shoehorn subplot in episode 2 about an interracial affair between a black man and a newly married white man that doesn't really go anywhere. And I mean, if there was a plot device about the affair that had any relevance to the story, then it would make sense, but it's just there.
And that's enough to get me hot.
It just feels like the producers of the BBC were trying to appeal to all demographics. And now I can see a board meeting where a guy with a clipboard is ticking all the boxes that would make a TV show appeal to everyone in the universe. Female lead? Check. Gay characters? Check. Troubled antagonist, protagonist, obsessive dynamic? Check. It just kind of removes you from all of it because we're not invested in your political or conglomerate angle. We want to see the story unfold in a natural and progressive way. So a lot of people will be commenting that the ending was a little hackneyed, that they stripped away Dracula's usual tropes and conventions to appease a modern audience. So essentially all the lore that we've been led to believe about vampires over the years, say crosses and sunlight and reflections in the mirror, are basically habits that Dracula has manifested into curses, so it's psychological disorder rather than physical. His mind tells him that he'll be burnt in the sun, therefore he thinks he will be burnt in the sun. That's the big reveal, I guess.
Surprise!
I didn't mind this explanation. In our society today, it's a nod of the hat to mental health issues, and I kind of like the way they were going with that. But in summary, 2020 Dracula's first 2 episodes were entertaining, but I think there'll be a lot of people on the sidelines with some of the decisions made for this particular interpretation. Whenever you have an IP of something embedded in so much folklore and mythos, changed for the original source material can either be taken with pleasure or pain. I would recommend this to friends, only to have a debate about the things we liked or despised about it, and the acting was superb from all actors, but in the end, I would give this a 6 out of 10.